Hey all. So I am here having a conversation with a dear friend of mine, Jesse Martin. My name is David Prince. I'm from a group called the Inner Circle, which has a room with T3 where primarily top tier traders, seven figures and more, are sharing ideas and trying to figure out how to better ourselves. I myself run a small hedge fund and do a fair amount of venture capital. I've been involved with deals like Hydrofarm, ExamWorks, Immunome, Montrose, to name a few. The reason we're here today, though, is to share the story of a friend of mine who started trading a couple of years ago. He has had remarkable success. This is primarily his main career now, but 2 years ago, he really barely knew what stocks were. He, of course, was involved with them, but they were not a means to a career, nor something that would change his life. Today, they have changed his life, and I think he's got a powerful story to share. So here we are to share it. His name is Jesse Martin, a well-known poker pro, a top-level DraftKings player. He's going to explain what that is because I'm kind of ruining the proper terminology, but that means that he's not on DraftKings playing for $400. He does it the real deal way. So without further ado, my friend Jesse, say hello and then tell me how the hell you got here, if you don't mind.
Hey, David, thanks a lot. So I am a member of the Inner Circle trading group that you run. But I got into stocks just pretty much right before the pandemic. Just happened to be in the right place, the right time, talking to the right people. And right before COVID really hit, I sold all I have an IRA, a self-employed IRA from poker that I've contributed to. So that's really my experience with stocks. And I had blue chips, Apple, Twitter, Facebook, all that kind of stuff. Sold it all right before COVID, and also had a big win on DraftKings right before COVID hit.
Well, let's stop. How did you know to sell it all right? I mean, you say that like I sold it all before COVID. I don't know if everyone knew to do that. How did you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I do know. So I'm like you said, I'm a poker player, and I'm very involved on Twitter. I'm kind of addicted to Twitter. I'm checking it all the time, and poker, just like financial, the financial world is very active on Twitter. So there's a big poker Twitter community, and there started to be a discussion on, okay, so the World Series of Poker happens every year in June, and poker players bet on everything. So the discussion was about, hey, there's this virus, we don't really know what's going to happen. And some people are like, I think it's going to be a little more serious than some people think. I'll take 5-1 that the World Series of Poker gets canceled. And that's really where it started. And the lines were moving around. And while everyone else wasn't really talking about it or thought it was a joke, and poker Twitter started to take it seriously and started putting lines on it. And I had already thought, the market, as we all know, was ramping up into COVID anyways. And as an inexperienced investor, I had started asking friends. I was like, hey, should I be, I bought Amazon at 1,000. Now it's at, you probably know more than me, whatever it was pre-COVID, 1,900. And I'm doubled in Twitter in a year. Like, this is not normal. I should probably be taking some profits.
So you knew things were good going into it.
Exactly. So that combined with the impending doom case, I was like, this is a good time just to take my account to zero. And honestly, that's what I did. I had a little bit of my account with a broker still. I had most of it that I controlled on my own, a little of the broker. The broker convinced me to keep 20% for whatever, broker reason.
You listen to the professional and you see what happens.
Exactly. So yeah.
Right. So sorry, I interrupted. Now take us to the DraftKings
took my account to zero. And then in 2019, I had this big DraftKings win. I got, a combination of luck and skill. I won $2 million in the DraftKings World Championships. And I hadn't, and because the market was hot at the time too, and again, this is me making my amateur macro calls. I didn't just take that money and put it all in the stock market. It was just kind of, I put some aside for taxes and some aside for other gambling, and really just had a bunch of money in my checking account.
Checking account? Okay.
Yeah, trying to decide, hey, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this. I was ready to deploy it, but hadn't made a decision yet. Just kind of just sitting there. So all that cash, as COVID hit, so I'm a professional poker player, as you said. Poker is the worst thing to do during a pandemic. So I wasn't doing any of that.
Oh, you mean you can't hang around with a bunch of people at a table?
Yeah, passing chips and cards around. Yeah. So there's none of that. There's a little online poker, but in the US, it's not really regulated or legal. So I wasn't really doing any of that either. And then, my DraftKings and sports betting stuff got shut down too the night that, Rudy Gobert got the positive COVID test. And so I'm sitting here with nothing to do. And but with all this cash, and I texted a friend. Unfortunately, I didn't know you at the time, or my story probably would have been even better. But I texted a friend who's pretty sharp, and I was like, "Hey, are you going to buy this dip at some point? What's the plan here? What are you going to do?" And at the time, to his credit, my friend Nick Krapis, at the time he was bearish, and he was right. And he's like, I wouldn't yet. But then, right around the time where the market turned, I stayed in touch with him, and I started to, put money in. And at the time, it didn't matter how inexperienced I was, just the fact that I was willing to put money to work in the stock market was enough. And so that's how I got started with the journey. And then soon after, I asked my friend Nick again. I was like, hey, because I was asking him a ton of questions, and it wasn't really fair to him. He was trading his own account, and while he was helping me, I asked him if he had recommendations for trading rooms to join, or even if trading rooms are legit, or are they all scams and all that kind of stuff. And he put me into a couple, or he suggested a couple, and I joined them. And I don't think he even suggested Redler at the time, but I eventually found T3 and Redler, and that's where I found you. Because you were in the chat room of Scott Redler's T3 group at the time, and I just quickly, to me, I don't think I've necessarily ever told you this, but for the first day or two, I was like, "Who's this guy? It seems like he knows everything. Does he really know everything?
I don't honestly remember our first contact. That's the funny thing. Like, you could tell me anything, I don't remember.
For a while, we didn't have too much of a contact. I would thank you and stuff for ideas, and I was cordial with you. And I think, but I don't. You probably, you were helping so many people that, I mean, to recognize who I was, at the time. And then eventually, I don't even remember what it was, but somehow I got your contact information, and we talked on the phone, and kind of told you what I was doing, and you told me what was right and what was maybe a little wrong, and to maybe pare down my, I had 60 positions on at the time, and Zoom, DocuSign, which is all good stuff to be in, but I didn't need to be in 60 of them because it's pretty hard to manage it all.